Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Now, I love it when they throw in some case candy, some printed cards in the Blu-ray. It makes the packaging come alive, and it really feels like that I've gotten my hands on some treasure. Now, be honest. Does this look infected to you? Be honest. Does it look bad? Now, this movie has an obsession over eyeballs. The all-seeing eye is everywhere. And I noticed when they go into the eyes, there's at first no attempt to exaggerate the stereo, leaving it relatively flat. And then we go in deep and some dark spirit is revealed. And that we see in wide stereo, in a way making the mind more real than the eye. We in fact get a fight with an eye in the form of an octopus. Now, for the stereo in this scene, they take an approach that I've seen with the first Pacific Rim movie. It's intended to be realistic in that big things, the 3D shows as being very shallow to mimic how we would really see a big thing in real life. But when we are on the ground, we see things spaced out a lot more. Again, how we would normally see things from our perspective when we're on the ground. Although I prefer seeing big things with a God's eye point of view, it does demonstrate that in this 3D, it's not thoughtless in this movie. They are working it. They are paying attention to what's being done. And a great moment that demonstrates this is when this door opens, revealing the encroaching monster. Now, I've slowed this down, but see how the stereo starts from a nearly flat and expands as we approach these evil eyes. This is the fourth Marvel movie to have the 3D version exclusively released in Japan, and if you were looking to just get one of them, this is easily the best 3D experience. There's just so much to look at. These colorful worlds they visit just naturally want to jump off the screen, and unlike that eyeball octopus scene, they let these establishing shots loose in the stereo world, letting you enjoy all of these floating particles. Apparently, the most common stars in our universe are ultraviolet, which are kind of like those nightclub blacklights. So I suppose it does stand to reason, from a human perspective, that the universe must be teeming with glowing pastel planets. Now, as said, this is a great 3D experience, and much of what makes this great is a large abundance of translucent and floaty stuff. It gives many scenes that what I like to think of as that shaken snow globe effect, where we get particles suspended in space, and we get a taste of it when we watch this sorcerer army put on this laser show. But really, the best example comes in this odd musical battle that I really can't explain exactly what was happening here, except that, damn, it sure looked cool. And really, the floating magic is just icing on a stereo cake, as we get this wonderfully messy room with all sorts of junk to look at. 3D loves junk, and yet it doesn't end there. It's all taking place with this spinning tunnel to nowhere in the deep background. On their own, any one of these elements would be a treat in stereo. Getting it all in the same shot just tickles my little stereo bones. Now, most 3D systems make the image you see a little darker. This is a side effect of having to filter the light to create the stereo effect in your eyes. An odd thing I noticed while comparing this movie to its two-dimensional counterpart is the many places the 3D version is actually slightly darker than the two-dimensional version. Usually you'll find the opposite to help compensate. And I really can't explain that. My best theory is that they wanted to cut down on the contrast, as sometimes highlights can create a false sense of 3D that might contrast where they were really going with it. Now, for those interested in seeing more 3D to 2D comparisons, I've put a link in the description for something of an addendum to this review, where I took a look at a few more slides. Now, this is an interesting movie, the kind of thing you can enjoy without thinking about it at all. It leaps seamlessly from one roller coaster moment to another. Really, the perfect 3D movie. It feels like it's being ripped right out of a theme park. Still, it does have interesting layers. It's meant to be a light horror movie, and it's not far removed from Evil Dead, maybe even closer to Army of Darkness. A lot of Sam Raimi's techniques from those movies lend themselves well to 3D. It's unfortunate that we don't have a conversion of Army of Darkness or even Evil Dead. That would be fantastic to behold. He has these weird zooms and creatures that are framed to intrude or disrupt the viewer. This is actually Raimi's second 3D movie, the prior being Oz, the Great and Powerful, which I'm actually kind of interested in taking a look at in 3D now. Now, we meet one character who we learn comes from something of what you might think of as a Garden of Eden. It looks like the cover of a Watchtower magazine. And like the story of Eden, it is fear that banishes her from this place, and fear that keeps her vulnerable. Kind of ironic that death is feared, but it's fear that opens the door to death. What's curious is we see she freaks out from encountering a bee. Now, who knows what the writers intended, but the bee has been used to represent Baphomet, I believe it's pronounced, which is something of a devil figure. Now, with Wanda, she needs to be the mother to the kids in her dreams, and she fears herself and is desperate to be an idealized version of herself. And the Doctor is not so different than Wanda. There's a trope buried in this movie that he must be the one holding the knife. That is to say, he has to be the hero at all and every cost. We get a hint of what might be underneath this insecurity when we watch him interact with his old flame from the first movie, who I kind of feel represents more than a lost romance, perhaps his perceived failures and ever-present self-judgment, a need to prove himself that he is, gosh darn it, good enough. Yet we also see that unmasking his hero facade is not a great solution. Taking a look at the hero failed is a dangerous thing. We see his castle becomes haunted, his world unkept and destructive. He becomes something of a living cancer. Instead of fearing his failures, he begins to take pleasure in them. These are all very interesting ideas to contemplate. It seems to play with the notion that fear is derived from one's identity. But mostly, it's actually just a cool movie. And that's probably the best thing about it.